parliament is split, of course, between conservatives, Marxists, and others, but the point is the system is open enough that we could even elect the Marxist as president. Now, that's, again, a very significant development, in my opinion. Now, right now, since the election of President Christofias, there has been an intensified effort to resolve the constitutional issue of Cyprus. And this time, after the failures of the Annan Plan in 2004, the Annan Plan was the plan devised by the former Secretary General Kofi Annan between 2002 and 2004. The current Secretary General of the UN, Ban Ki-moon, the worst of the Secretary Generals to set foot in the UN, but it's okay, just got re-elected for 5 more years. Well, you know, people make mistakes. UN Secretary Generals are expendable commodities. If they don't play, they marry them in the Russian game. You know? So Ban Ki-moon got elected because he plays the game. Anyway, Ban Ki-moon is now has appointed, of course, Alexander Downer as his special representative of Cyprus, who's leading the Cyprus talks. And next week, on the 7th of July, they're meeting in Geneva to reassess where the Cyprus talks are moving. Unfortunately, the talks are not moving anyplace, because what Alexander Downer has done and is doing is to revive the failed Annan Plan from 2004. This is where the resurrection, if you're a good Christian, you believe in the resurrection, you know. Ban Ki-moon is not a Christian, but he believes in the resurrection, so he has resurrected the Annan Plan, different chapters of the Annan Plan, and he's trying to implement them under the auspices of what he calls a Cyprus solution. Well, it's not a Cyprus solution. He is more or less negotiating between the Turkish Cypriot side, which has no voice of its own. The Turkish Cypriot leadership has said whatever we're presenting and putting on the table has been written in Agora, approved in Agora, and we're simply presenting it in the talks. The government of Cyprus is trying to fall within the parameters of the UN Security Council resolutions. But everything has now come to the point of discussing the details of what they call in the UN the bizonal, bicommunal federation. Well, I can tell you 2 things about this constitutional construct, and I'm going to stop. Nobody understands what the bizonal, bicommunal federation construct is all about. Because what they have put on the table is not a federation. It's a confederal arrangement with 2 largely autonomous states where the federal government derives its power from the states rather than having supremacy of federal law or anything like that. But they're talking about federation to fool the public, because if they said confederation, people would say, you're just simply legitimizing the outcome of the Turkish invasion. Another disturbing thing about the plan for the so-called bizonal bicommunal federation is that it's in direct violation of the European Convention on Human Rights. Article 14 says no discrimination on the basis of ethnicity, religion, and language. And the whole bizonal bicommunal construct that Alexander Downer is pushing down the throat of the Cypriots right now is based on 2 states created on the basis of ethnicity, religion, and language. The elections are based on this kind of discrimination. The political offices are going to be distributed on the basis of this kind of discrimination. How can you do that when the European Convention on Human Rights is also fundamental law in the European Union? So you have a member that is somehow separate from the rest of the European community. This is a very critical time in the history of Cyprus. The pressures are immense to close the book on the Cyprus problem. But you can close the book the way they did in 1960. You can close the book the way attempts were done during the Atchison days and on to impose a solution, resolve Cyprus, put away the problem. But these things usually backfire, and And when they backfire, the problem becomes worse than it was before. So, again, a lot of the foreign mediators, you know, seem to have the habit of wanting to have the fame. I solved the Cyprus problem. Alexander Downer, in the meeting I had with him 2 years ago in Adelaide, he said to me, I will not fail. You will not fail. The only problem is that what they have put on the table, and you know, again, the negotiations are secret, but yet you'll be very surprised if you have a great contacts what you will find about secret negotiations. I have gotten a big text of stuff that floats around. These things did not work in 1959, did not work in 1974, have not worked since then. They're not going to work now. Downer will probably closing the book on Cyprus, but 2 years from now, if the book is closed, we'll have the same problem, even in bigger dimensions than ever before. That's why, if there is a solution, and I'm very pessimistic that there will be a solution under the present circumstances, when it goes to referendum, both in the Turkish Cypriot and the Greek Cypriot community, the answer is going to be no, by the Greek Cypriot majority, much as it was in 2004. The answer is very simple in many ways. The Cyprus issue is never dealt with the principles we preach. We preach democracy, we preach the rule of law, we preach all those wonderful things, self-determination. Well, the moment the strategic considerations come up in the 50s, it was strategy in the Middle East. The United States needed Turkey to be part of CENTO, the Central Treaty Organization that was built in 1955. Then we got into the Cold War. We could not upset Turkey because of the control of the Straits, the Soviet Navy, and all those wonderful things. Then, in the post-Cold War period, we have Islamophobia. Suddenly, Turkey claims to be the great protector of the West, even though it's going Islamic itself. That, again, it stands the critical bastion between Islam and the West and wants to play that mediating role. So everybody closes their eyes to what is law, what is human rights, and all that. When my government goes and preaches democracy, addressed issues affecting the European Commission of Human Rights, the European Court of Human Rights, and the implementation of the decisions of the European Court of Human Rights, my own government was against the implementation of the decisions of the European Court of Human Rights, which is something that is mandatory under the European Convention of Human Rights. Why? Because Turkey will be upset. Now, the US is not a member of the European Convention. It cannot be, it's not a European country. It thinks it is, but it's not. So, I mean, it has that kind of pressure was applied to keep the reports of the European Commission of Human Rights secret, to keep the decisions of the European Court of Human Rights not implemented, and yet it preaches democracy and the rule of law to everybody else. Why? Because if we implemented these things, Turkey would be upset. So, strategic interests come in, and they derail the real fundamental values we preach for international law. The EU, in many ways, has failed in a lot of areas. By the way, I'm an advocate of the European Union. I have always believed in European unity. The deepening and the widening of the European Union, I think, is very important. But unfortunately, it's not happening. And you see even in the economic area where they have had a great success, unity has failed. There is no common defense or foreign policy. There is a lot of discord among the European Europeans over that. And you have Trojan horses inside the EU, starting in Great Britain, which is the voice of Washington in the EU that divides Europe very nicely.
But it's still the longest period of peace that they've had in Europe, though, for a long time.
Charles de Gaulle, vetoed the British admission to the EEC those days, because he felt that, very correctly, that England is not going to be speaking as England. England will be speaking for Washington. And that's exactly what happened. Now, what is interesting is that the EU itself, divided and weak as it is in the area of foreign affairs, the West, the United States, does not want the EU to get involved in Cyprus. In 2004, during the Annan Plan, the greatest compromise done by England and the US and the UN was to allow an observer of the European Union to be present in the final talks. Observer is very different than mediator, negotiator, because they did not want direct engagement. They claimed that because Cyprus and Greece were members of the EU is prejudiced against Turkey, which is this, it's a silly argument, but that's exactly what they used to say. And they wanted the EU observer to be present only to legitimize the derogations from the acquis communautaire that they were putting together. End result, the EU has not been effective, and anytime the EU has attempted to be part of the resolution process, it has been shut down by both the United States and Great Britain. So, unfortunately, the EU cannot do much, or does not want to do much. Jane?
Yes, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what you see.
In 1974, according to the census data, there are about 124,000 Turkish Cypriots. Today, the estimate is that native-born Turkish Cypriots are about 85,000, 82, between 82 and 85,000. The numbers are not clear. Yet the population in the occupied areas, depending on whose data you look at, range from about 290,000 to close to 500,000. There's big debate, and part of the discussions about the resolution of the Cyprus problem are putting on the table the need for an independent census to find out who is who. Now, in the occupied areas, the growth in the Turkish Cypriot population is not by natural birth. These are the settlers that have come in from Anatolia. And these settlers are not economic refugees. Here you get economic and political refugees from Indonesia, Malaysia, and all those various places. These people are brought into Cyprus by the government of Turkey, given houses, jobs. They're paid to move to Cyprus to change the demography of the island. Now, this is not Coufoudakis telling you. If you look at the two reports of the Council of Europe, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, one in 1991, the Couco report. Couco is a Spanish parliamentarian who headed the investigative committee, and 2 years later, a Finnish parliamentarian, the Lazo report on the population in occupied Cyprus. They describe the influx of settlers in occupied Cyprus as the biggest demographic change that has taken place in any European country since the end of World War II. That is in direct violation of the Geneva Convention, the 1949 Geneva Convention, that says occupied areas cannot be settled by the occupying power. But who cares? There are no sanctions on Turkey, so the demographic change continues. So right now, settlers are dependent on the government of Turkey for their survival, for their support, and everything. And therefore they'll do whatever they're told to do. Turkish Cypriots are voting by their feet. That's why from 124,000, they're down to 82,000, 85,000. And the rest have simply gone to places like Canada, the US, Australia, and Germany. Because culturally, Turkish Cypriots, native-born Turkish Cypriots, and settlers are two totally different groups of people. I've been to the occupied part of Cyprus multiple times. I've seen villages where settlers live. And if you look at the settlers, you don't have to go very far. You don't even have to ask a question, who are you? The women are dressed in long dresses. Their heads are covered. Their sleeves are down here. Native-born Turkish Cypriot girls in Nicosia go around like any Greek Cypriot girl in Nicosia. The tight jeans, the cutouts, you know, the whole works. The guys look with beards, Islamic beards and stuff like that. Unfortunately also, a lot of Saudi money has come to occupied Cyprus. Islamization is extensive. There are new mosques that have been built all over the place. Not that the Turkish Cypriots are not Muslims, they were, but they were secularized Muslims. You know, you did the Bayram holidays, you did those things, life was good. Now you have Islamic schools that are springing up, and you have that funny new movement that is coming out of Turkey, the Gülen movement, a reformist Islamic movement that has now taken roots even in the United States, and now they're appearing in occupied Cyprus as well. So things are changing, and these are the things that are driving the Turkish Cypriots out. And because we're talking about reconciliation, resolution, and so on, the ultimate question becomes, once upon a time, before the constitutional troubles, Greek Cypriots, Turkish Cypriots had a lot of commonalities. You know, they worked in the same cities and all. They lived next to each other in many cases. But who are you going to be compatriot with now? Settlers who are fundamentalist Muslims from the Anatolian part of Turkey? That's going to be a very interesting challenge, yes.
Well, the settlers certainly money the water.
I'm sorry?
The settlers.
Yes. This is a very interesting point, because, you know, in 2003, in April, the regime in the occupied part of Cyprus was nearly at the point of financial collapse. And the Turkish army decided to open the dividing line, the green line, the ceasefire line, to allow traffic back and forth. Turkish Cypriots to visit the free areas, Greek Cypriots to visit north, tourism and so on. That was a big breakthrough. What is interesting is from that moment on, native-born Turkish Cypriots can come to the free areas of Cyprus to work at same wages Greek Cypriots command. When I was working for the University of Nicosia as their rector, I lived in a suburb of Nicosia, not far from the old international airport, and right across from me there are buildings some really magnificent houses. The houses are being built by Turkish Cypriots, you know, because they're excess labor, good workers, so they would come in here and you could tell they were Turkish Cypriots by the car plates they had, you know. Anyway, jobs at equal wages with the Greek Cypriots, free medical care, and if you needed medicine, free medicinal care. Now, that's in addition to the other benefits that they've been able to get to collect their pensions from the Republic of Cyprus, those who had pensions from before the constitutional troubles and so on. So, with the old-timers, the reunions that have taken place are real. And Greek Cypriots go to their villages to visit, but unfortunately they visit as tourists. Now, Turkish Cypriots, since the reopening of the Green Line, who can be verified that they're native-born Turkish Cypriots, can claim the passports of the Republic of Cyprus. And most of them do. The Republic of Cyprus has issued thousands of passports to native-born Turkish Cypriots, and they can travel abroad and all that. So the benefits are there, the links are there, but they also live under a tightly controlled political regime that allows them so much freedom and nothing more. the sense that if the Greek Cypriots are not making the compromise they're making, things would be different. But again, even a mediator, I mean, take a look at the report that Gala Plaza did in 1965 on Cyprus. That's another document that should be read by a lot of people, because the mediator is not a hired gun that is simply told, go solve this problem, and we don't care how you do it. It takes a few moral standards of your own, it takes some ideas of your own. You're not just a hired gun, you're not a mercenary. So, that's why read the Gala Plaza report of 1965 and then think about what Downer is doing, despite the mistakes of the Greek citizens. Well, his business interests, from what I know, he is a member of the board of a consulting company made up of MI6 members from England, retired MI6 types. And they do consulting for foreign governments on risk assessment issues. One of their primary clients is the government of Turkey. To me, that's a conflict of interest. It's a classic case of conflict of interest. He could have quit the company. There's no reason why he cannot rejoin it after he completes his negotiations in Cyprus, but anybody who works for somebody else, you know, it raises some ethical questions about how independent his thinking is going.
Could I just ask a question?
The company's name, I think, is Haklut, H-A-K-L-U-Y-T or something like that.
This is another question altogether. Had it not been for the meddling of the Greek Judah, would Cyprus have remained? Would Cyprus have still been partitioned?
No, because you see, even though during the coup became the rationalization for the Turkish invasion, okay, so even though during the course of the intercommunal troubles from 1964 to 1974, there had been separation in communities. There had been enclaves set up as part of the Turkish policy of separating the two communities. Because Cyprus was, you know, people lived all around the place. There were not Greek areas or Turkish areas. Anyway, in 1968, under the United Nations, they started new discussions about resolving the constitutional deadlock that had come to Cyprus over the unworkable provisions of the 1960 constitution. Okay? Now, in the case of the talks had come to an agreement. Actually, I have seen the documents. The Greek Cypriots negotiators, Giridis, Denktash spoke for the Turkish Cypriots, and then there were two constitutional lawyers, one from Greece, one from Turkey, Aldikashti from Turkey, the Clarice from Greece. And on the 13th of July, 1974, that's 2 days before the coup, they had an agreement on amending the Cypriot constitution. All these documents are available today. And the coup came 2 days later, and Turkey used the coup as the pretext to invade.
But had the pairs of many Americans, had they insisted of Turkey withdrawing from Cyprus? Well, they wouldn't have done, but
There's not insistence on the part of Washington.
no, what I'm saying is there were plans behind the scenes for something like this to happen. Now,
Turkey, look, the United States had its hands full in that period of time. Remember the Middle East War of 1973 that really upset, even put the United States into a nuclear alert status and all that. I don't think the US was prepared for what happened in Cyprus, although they knew about it. Kissinger didn't do anything to stop it.
I was going to say, what was the role of Kissinger?
Kissinger is the moving force behind what happened in 1974. The US was fully aware. I mean, if you look at the reports from the US Embassy in Nicosia, if you hear the testimony of Tom Boyd, who was the Cyprus desk officer when the coup took place and everything else, they knew things were happening. Kissinger didn't want to do anything to stop it. For that matter, when Tom Boyd disagreed with Kissinger and his handling of the case in the summer of 1974, I mean, when the coup and everything was followed, he was plucked out of his office as head of the Cyprus desk, and you know where he was transferred? Latin American affairs.
Okay, we'll take 2 more questions and then we should wind it up.
Yes.
Just one relevant question with regards to that as well. If Kissinger obviously was aware of it to the nth degree, no doubt MI5 and MI6 would have been up to the eyeballs with it as well, I would assume. And the British bases as well, for that matter as well, in Larnaca as well as in Tikelia, in Episcopia, and so forth, because I was there.
They knew, I mean, look, they knew.
Of course they knew.
It's a question of why didn't they stop it?
Exactly.
Yes.
Well, wasn't Kissinger an anti-Macarius? Personally, he had an anti-Macarius view.
Yes.
And secondly, the alliance with the Turks and the necessity for maintaining the Turks as a buffer in the Middle East. But
Kissinger also had the theory of bringing solutions by changing the balance of power. And he played those games in the 1973 war. I know we're taking more time than we should. During the 1973 war, when the Israelis regained the offensive and crossed over the Suez and surrounded the city of Suez, who stopped them from forcing the surrender of the city of Suez? It was Kissinger. And he did it by imposing an arms embargo on Israel for the simple reason that he knew that now the Israelis had gone too far. And if he was going to be able to bring about some kind of discussion and negotiation between them, the scales had been tipped too negatively in favor of Israel. So he wanted to change the balance. And at that moment, he did the same thing in Cyprus, where the Greek Cypriots were in control. So he felt that by letting Turkey step in, he was going to be able to restore some kind of balance, change the dynamics,